Welcome to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. I believe every man has the potential to push past his limits and strive for something greater. Whether you're a former athlete who is looking for what's next, a professional pushing through the daily grind, or someone simply ready to break through life's toughest challenges, if you're ready to step into the pursuit of something more, your pursuit begins now. Hey, welcome back to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin, and today we have Jay Holgate joining us. So Jay, before we dive into your story, a few sports questions for you. The first one, like your favorite all-time sports team.
So you will never hear this from another person that you interview.
Here we go.
My favorite sports team is the 1984 South Carolina Gamecock football team. Now, that particular team beat Georgia, Clemson, Florida State, and Notre Dame. All we had to do was beat Navy to finish out the season, and we're going to the top game. But we lost to Navy. We went up there. It was raining. It was cold. And I think our team maybe went out the night before because they thought it was an easy win. But that 1984 team, that was my sophomore year in college. And it was an amazing year of college football.
And that's South Carolina Gamecocks.
All correct.
Right. Yeah.
Shane Beamer's team.
There you go. Any fans out there, you heard it. 1984. All right. How about your favorite all-time? I know there's a lot of athletes you may share a lot, but what about one favorite all-time athlete?
So the guy that I really think about the most as far as being just a top athlete is Michael Jordan. I'm from that age. Michael Jordan was just our guy. I'm also a big Tiger Woods guy. I love the mental toughness of both those guys. I felt like when they were playing, the focus, the intensity was very good. The stuff that they did to prepare for games was pretty amazing. And so I've studied a lot about those two guys, and I think a lot of the things that they did incorporated that as part of my teaching.
All right. I love it. Shout out to MJ and Tiger. All right. One quick highlight. You're a mental performance coach. Just give us one quick highlight.
I'm a guy that basically starts every morning early, and I work through 8 or 9 phone calls per day, talking to athletes every single day. And every day is a fight for me, but I'm just going to talk about today. This morning, I went to a signing for a kid that a year and a half ago, he told me that he wanted to play in the NFL. And I told him, you're not even starting as a quarterback, and you just finished your 11th grade year. So I need you to quit talking about the NFL, and I need you to start talking about processes and commitments to working out with weights, working with a quarterback coach, getting mentally tougher. So that kid signed a college scholarship today with a D2 school, New Haven, which is in Connecticut. And that's just today. But we get wins like that every single day, that are very similar to that. But this is a kid that had a lot of talent. He had a lot of dreams, but we had to turn that into reality. And that basically required hard work. And he did the hard work. It was a little bit of a battle, but he did the hard work. And now he's going to go play college football.
All right, there it is. And what you said, win the day.
Always.
All right, let's get into your story and take us back to, I believe, in North Augusta.
Okay.
And what was it like growing up there, and how that environment really shaped your early love for sports?
Okay, so I grew up in the suburbs of Augusta, Georgia. So I grew up on the South Carolina side of the line. And the town that I lived in, most of the dads were engineers, and the majority of them were from up north. So a lot of them came down to work at the Savannah River plant, which was managed by DuPont. And so a lot of the dads worked in atomic energy, and my dad did as well. So my town was pretty traditional. It would look like a beaver cleaver kind of town. Most of the men worked at the Savannah River plant, and a lot of the women stayed at home and raised kids. It was a very traditional town. I think high values overall, high morals. We went to church every single Sunday for the entire time that I lived in my dad's house. That's what we did. But it was a great town. Like, high school football games, stuff like that. The whole town shut down on Friday nights. People went to high school football games, huge band, pretty cheerleaders, and very athletic kids out there competing for 4 quarters, and just a lot of energy. And I remember even like third grade going to those games, and it was just a lot of fun.
You mentioned, I know we talked a few weeks ago, being at the Masters when you were 12 years of age. What do you remember most about your first experience, and how did that kind of plant a seed for you for your dream of coaching?
The first time I ever went to the Masters, I was in 6th grade, and my dad got tickets to the Masters back in the day. And I've got 2 older brothers, so I got to go out there on one day with my dad. And we went up to the driving range. And my dad was a methodical guy. So we would start at the driving range, then we would see them chip, then we'd see them putt, and then they would go to the first hole, and then we'd follow them around. And so I remember just going to that driving range, and we're just sitting there, and the golfers would come out one by one, and they would talk to each other a little bit. This was back in the Jack Nicklaus days and Arnold Palmer and all these big names, and Tiger Woods as well. But I just remember back in those days as a little boy, I looked at the coaches that were talking to the golfers, and I was like, who is that? And they're like, that's his golf coach. I was like, well, what does he do? And they're like, oh, he guides them through playing, how to play, works on his swing, and they just talk them through. And I was fascinated by that. I was like, oh, that would be a great job. You don't have to be the guy. You just got to be the guy working with the guy. And so I was just thinking to myself, oh, man, that would be an awesome job. And that was like the first seed that was planted in me, where consulting, advising, understanding the processes, understanding the mental part, it just all started right there. And then I've continued to learn things from there.
What amazing experience. And people dream to maybe just drive by it. Like, just, hey, can I just kind of walk in there, Augusta, and just, maybe there's nothing going on, but I just want to just see one of the holes, or where is this located? But for you to experience that at 12 years of age, and then have the opportunity to continue to go back every year and work.
And so I also, when I was in high school, I started working on one of the scoreboards there. So I worked on the 4th hole, and I worked on that scoreboard for probably in high school and through college. Yeah. And one of the guys I worked with on the scoreboard, he basically, this is the first year he hasn't done it since we were in high school. And so I'm going to turn it over to the next generation. But I worked on the scoreboard. We had a good time doing that. And when I was in college, one of my friends would come down. We'd go to the Masters. As soon as the Masters was over, we'd head down to Hilton Head. And we'd go watch the Heritage. And we'd do that for a few days. And it was just good times in the spring.
Wow. You're talking about golf in that area. From the Augusta, and then made your way to, where was it again?
Hilton Head.
Oh, yeah, Hilton Head. That's right. Okay. I know growing up, we had talked a few weeks ago about a legend, Charlie Waters. And so what was it like being around the legends like Charlie Waters and others who played for Georgia? How did that presence in your neighborhood influence your kind of mindset and your kind of direction in regards to sports and success?
So in the area that I grew up in, being right there on the border, our area, people had 3 schools to choose from. They were either a Clemson fan, a South Carolina fan, or a Georgia fan. And all those schools were within 2 hours of North Augusta. And so in my church, we had a guy that had played running back in South Carolina. We had 2 guys that had played running back. When I was in 6th grade, there was a guy named Pat Collins. He had played on that 1980 Georgia team. He was a linebacker for them. He was a superstar in high school. And I just remember when he was out there, he was a quarterback, he was a free safety, he was a punter, he returned the kickoffs and returned punts, and he was the best guy on the field. And I just remember watching him, and he was just in another level of playing. And then he went to Georgia. They won a national championship. And later on, after college, I got to play against him in basketball, and he ran over me like 4 times. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. He was built like Adonis, and he was amazing athlete. But it was fun competing with him, but he was always on a whole nother level than most everybody in my town at that time. And he played all kinds of sports year round. It was just the way he did it. but our area was really heavy, Georgia, South Carolina, and Clemson. And to this day, I think it still is. There's always a flag out of one of those schools.
So you got the Clemson, you got the South Carolina, Georgia, and I believe Charlie Waters, he ended up going to Georgia.
So he went to Clemson.
Oh, he went to Clemson, that's right.
And then he played for the
Georgia
Dallas
fans.
Cowboys.
Or Clemson fans. Yeah, that's right.
And then I ended up marrying a Georgia Bulldog as well. So she's from Atlanta, but I ended up, against my family's best hopes, I ended up marrying a Georgia girl.
Hey, just to let the audience know and let you know, I'm a Cowboy fan.
Okay, nice.
So just everybody out there, I know some people kind of love him, some people hate him, but I'm a Cowboy fan and I stayed with him. So I appreciate it. And I know Charlie Waters, so I don't personally know him, but I know him through the Cowboy organization. All right, let's move on to now you attended South Carolina and worked a number of jobs, I know, after college. Walk us through those years and some of the turning points or lessons you picked up along the way.
Okay. I think that I would advise younger people to do it differently, and we'll get into that at a later point. But when I graduated from college, the job market was not that great, and we were just trying to do anything. Technically, you could get a job that you didn't have to go to college. You could get a lot of waiting jobs and construction jobs and stuff like that. And so when I graduated from college, I was really good at college. Like, I figured it out. I had friends. I was good in school. I had the system down. I knew where the places to eat were. I was at a lot of sporting events and just enjoyed that. But once the college time ended, it was like, holy cow, what am I going to do now? And I still, when I go to somebody's graduation, I'm like, man, they don't know how good they got it while they're here. It's almost sad for me thinking about coming out of college. These kids have a little bit different market because they can get on all these apps and things like that, like Indeed and stuff like that, and get jobs. But when we got out, it was basically you had to go through newspapers, word of mouth, and there just weren't a lot of jobs. So I worked in construction for a few years. That kind of parlayed over into real estate. I had a pretty decent success with real estate. My wife at the time, we were both in it together, and we were pretty good at it. The times were right. It was right. There's a lot of people trying to buy houses, and there was enough people trying to sell houses, and we were pretty good salespeople. And so we made some pretty good money there for a while, but at the expense of my marriage. Too much time, too much money coming in a little too fast. I don't think we were really ready for all that. And I didn't want to be in real estate long term. Nothing against anybody that does it. There's a lot of successful people, but I was good at it, but it wasn't my passion. So I moved out of that. I moved down to Atlanta, which is about 2.5 hours away. And I took over a logistics company down there for some real estate attorneys down there. Did that for a few years until that bubble hit in 2008, 2009. And basically we had about 20 people. We were doing about $1 million a year, and the phone quit ringing overnight. And it was a lot of pressure. So when that whole bubble hit, I was like, I'm done doing this other stuff. I'm going to do something that I want. I started doing like some side hustles with sports. So I started a sports website, SEC Sports Report. I had a bunch of people following me back in the day. This was before anything was monetized and anybody knew how to do any of that stuff. I have a tendency to be a little bit ahead of the curve on some of that stuff. I was pretty knowledgeable because I was basically an aggregator for SEC news. So I followed the firings, who signed with who, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of that information. And but there was a point where I was just like, okay, I got to move on. I did create an app. I made some money off of that. Then I did some sports radio. I started writing some stuff, even for my site. I did some of it for Yahoo. But I had to have some steady income coming in. So I got into recruiting, worked out of this gym called GATA. We trained a ton of NFL guys, a bunch of Major League Baseball guys. And then I helped the football players get spots in college. So I did that for a period of time. And then once that whole COVID thing hit, everything changed on that. And I just moved over to more the counseling side and just made that really a full-time business. And so once I got into that, it was just I've got one ad out there on Psychology Today, and I was good at it. I actually had started another company, and I was doing the sports counseling as a side deal just to have money coming in. But the other deal fizzled out, And the psychology stuff started working so well. So now I work with 100 clients, and I do about 40 something hours a week of counseling. And it's been a fun business to work in.
We'll go back to when we talked a few weeks ago about when you did some sports stories for Yahoo, or I think it was, where you were shoulder to shoulder with outlets like Fox Sports and ESPN, I believe. And what was that like? Here you are, new in it, and then to your right is ESPN, to your left is Fox
Right.
Sports.
So what happened was I had the website, and it was getting a lot of traffic, but to me, it was still like a one-man operation. So I was like, what do I got to lose? I'm going to apply for credentials. So I applied to the SEC office to get credentials, and they sent me a thing back, and they're like, you got them. Now, what happens is at that point, if you want to go to a Tennessee football game, you got to send your stuff into them, and they got to approve it. And so my team was South Carolina, so I applied for a couple of those games. At the very one, so one of the games that I went to early on, so I went to a South Carolina game. Then there was a game in Atlanta on New Year's Eve. I went to that game. They set me beside a Fox Sports, one of their radio guys, and I was watching the way that he was recording the game. So he took every single play, and he just wrote little abbreviated notes, but it was fascinating for me because I'd never seen that. The other two guys that I was sitting there with, one of them had a radio show in Columbia, South Carolina, and the other one had one in Clemson. So they both asked me to be weekly guests on their show. And so I did that. I ended up doing it for 8 years, and it actually showed up on their site a few times and did live shows and stuff like that. But I did a weekly call-in show. I would call in from Atlanta, and then I would be on their show, and they would just ask me random questions about South Carolina, Clemson, Georgia, anybody in the SEC. And it was just a lot of fun.
Do you find any challenges with that when you're live and just talking about sports, or did it just flow?
Back in the day, you didn't have people that were such know-it-alls. I think today's market would be a lot different because all these people that are on social media, they're such know-it-alls. They're very quick to give their opinions, and they don't have as much respect for people of authority. Now, I was a person who researched the stuff. So I wasn't just a fan sitting on the sofa, just giving an opinion. I was well versed in the stuff. So we never had any issues. Both the guys, nothing shook those guys. They could handle anything, and then if we couldn't handle it, we just go to a break. We'll take a break, and we got a commercial break. But they were pretty cool, and we just laughed. It was a good time, though. It was good.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate sharing that, because some people are wondering how that was being live. And you're right. I think it would be a little different today doing that. You were made for more clarity, more confidence, more impact. At Mop & Coaching, I help high school and college athletes master the mental game and guide men into purpose-driven leadership. Grab the sports book, rock that merch coming soon, and step into more at mopandcoaching.com. Let's get to I think you already kind of shared a little bit, but I think you made a move to this kind of mental performance coach, but why the move to Jacksonville? What kind of prompted and kind of shifted that move? And then also with that, kind of share us about how you carved out a niche in the mental performance coach for certain kind of sports.
So basically with the move to Jacksonville, I was living in Atlanta, and Atlanta it's very landlocked. You're 5-6 hours away from the beach, and living in South Carolina, if I wanted to go to the beach for the day, we could do it. We are 2.5 hours away. We go to the beach for the day, come back. And with it being in Atlanta, when we would go on spring break and those kind of things, you would be in tons of traffic because everybody was on spring break at the same time. And I really missed being near the ocean. I missed the vibe of the ocean and all that. And I basically told my wife, I've been here for 15 years, and I know that you love this town. I have gotten good training here. I've learned a lot. It's been a lot of adversity, and I feel like I'm a much better person. but I paid my dues, and now I'm going to move to Florida, and I'm going to live near the beach, which is a lot more relaxed and less stressful for me. And I am a significantly better counselor. I give much better advice being down here than living in a town with 6 million people that are all trying to go the same direction and going to the grocery store, taking 25 minutes every time you want to go to the grocery store. It's 2 miles away. Like it just, that was not enjoyable for me. And I had been on that I-400. I did that for 10 years, an hour to work in the morning in bumper to bumper traffic, an hour home every night. And I was just like, this is not what I want to do anymore. Even if they're paying a lot of money, it's not the deal. I want to go do something that's a lot more relaxing.
Ties in there being mentally, physically, emotionally prepared to work with your clients in the mental performance coach. And tell us about the niche. Why the niche? Why the certain sports you focus on?
So when I was working in recruiting, I was working in the football. And what I found out was I was really spending a lot more time trying to get the football players to think about it a lot differently. It wasn't just about getting in the gym more. It wasn't just more about getting their name out there and all that. It was really, most of these kids, even to this day, they don't have the right mindset. They don't have the right work ethic. And so if they don't have that, they're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities. And it was a natural fit for me. I was having parents asking me, hey, can you just talk to my son? I'll pay you an hourly rate. And people were asking me that. And I was, you know what? I have a life coaching certificate. And so I've already done this. I just need to jump in on a deeper level. And so once I started getting a few customers, started working it a little bit more, and it was just a natural fit. I'm fascinated by how the mind works. I'm fascinated about how the mind works under pressure, all things involved with that. To me, when I remember the first time I read Golf is Not a Game of Perfect, that literally the words came off the page. I was like, that is the most fascinating book I've ever read in my life. And I probably got 100 sports psychology books upstairs. When I read them, I just come alive. And so I didn't know any of this stuff as a kid, but if I would have known it, I just would have enjoyed sports a lot more. And when kids do know it and have the right mindset and can stay cool and calm under pressure, they just play a lot better, which is a lot more fun.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And your kind of niche has been more in, I know you work with a variety of athletes, but you've worked with baseball players. I think you'd mentioned golf, some golfers, I think quarterbacks, but I think you've expanded outside of that too.
So technically all the principles, it doesn't matter if they're a swimmer, gymnastics, track and field. The three big ones for me, the majority, 90% of my customers are baseball, football, and then golf. And those three areas are sports that I watch on TV. I do enjoy them. These other sports, I've done it all. And actually had a kid that I would meet at the country club. He was like 14 years old. He was a skateboarder. He would have a Uber car pull up, drop him off. He would come inside. He had corporate sponsors for his stuff. And so I would sit down with him, talk to him for an hour and a half. And then he'd be like, okay. And then his Uber would come up and they pull up and they just take him out. And it was just like his mom would just, here's my credit card number. I was like, this isn't too bad. I can do this. But now at this point, I'm a little bit more, it has to do with the person's personality. I prefer certain personalities. I like, usually if somebody calls me up and they're like, oh yeah, we need you and we're ready to start now. If they say that, they're probably going to be a good customer. The people that are like, we're just checking it out, we're not sure, those people, they're going to get lost. And I don't really want to have to sell what I do. I'm not going to. If somebody doesn't recognize that a person that works in mental performance helps everybody get to a higher level a lot quicker, when you only got 3 years in high school to get to a high level, if they don't realize that the time is clicking fast, then it's not a good client because you don't have a lot of time and you got to make up for lost time because you're competing against the Pat Collins of the world who are really elite athletes.
Well, you think about how all of us need some form of mental performance coach. It doesn't, in life, it's like, we're not just talking about athletes, like all people, how we'd benefit from it. So no, I appreciate you sharing that. Well, what about like one success set or just maybe some challenges, successes along the way that really kind of maybe tested you?
So back in 2019, I was working with a kicker that played at App State, and he was from Georgia. So the good thing about it too is I lived in Atlanta, so I really know how Atlanta runs and operates. Still 80% of my clients come from Atlanta. So I get to work with Atlanta people, but I live at the beach. That's the best of both worlds. But this particular guy lived in North Atlanta. He was a kicker coming out of high school. He went to App State, and he was on that series of teams that were pretty good, and they were winning some games. So I was working with him. He was much more consistent with his kicking. He was doing well. And then next thing you know, App State's on the board to play South Carolina. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go up there and watch him play. South Carolina's going to whip those guys, but it'll be fun to go up there. And I'll go up there and visit my daughter. And so I go up there. And so that game started out a little bit rough. And it was one of those kind of games where I'm happy for him, but I'm not happy that his team is beating my team. And he had 2 field goals in that game, and he had 1 extra point. So App State upset South Carolina. They beat us 20-15, and he had the most points in the game. He had 7 points out of their 20, and made 2 pretty clutch field goals. So after the game was over, I got to meet with his family and him. So after the game is over, we just got beat. We got upset, which is very hard to deal with. And then I go down to the opponent's end zone. South Carolina fans are saying stuff as you're driving by, but I'm there with his mom and dad, and they're like, "Isn't this great? Isn't this great?" And I'm just like, "Oh boy." And I'm trying to be happy for them, but it was like getting sucker punched. And so anyway, he comes out, I give him a big hug. I'm like, "Man, you look great out there today. You guys whipped us." And he goes, "We sure did." And that was it. And he gets on his bus and he's out of there. And I'm just happy for him. When it's all said and done, it's all about the kids anyway.
Yeah, that's so true. Hey, that mental performance coaching pays off.
Yeah.
That's upset the Gamecocks.
I didn't think that it would go against me like that. But has quite often, honestly.
Hey, Jay, can you share with the audience about some of where you had the most, you feel, personal, professional growth in your life, and what caused that growth?
So my biggest growth was moving to Atlanta, moving to a bigger city as a young person. I think that growing up in a medium-sized town, going to a college that was in a medium-sized town, there is a certain amount of growth that comes from that. But when you move to a city like Atlanta, 6 million people, busiest airport in the world, some of the smartest people in the world, all the top companies are there. You got to step up your game. And I just think that I really like the professionalism of it. I like being around smart people. People there are hard workers, whether it's somebody to bring wood to your house, fixing your plumbing, or people that work for these corporations. They're all smart people, hard workers, high expectations, all of that. And I did like it. My son was playing in like a 8-year-old 7-on-7 league. And there was like in that league, the parents, like they would all show up, both mom and dad. A lot of the dads had played either college football or professional football. The amount of just talent, expertise was just all over the place, even for 8-year-old teams. And so that's a lot of fun. These are people that have gone through the grinder. They know the sport, and they're working with 8-year-olds. And so I really enjoyed the competition of North Atlanta. A lot of the people were from Georgia, Auburn, a lot of the SEC schools, as well as northern schools. And so it was a very competitive environment. Even in my neighborhood, it was almost like people were competing to see who had the best looking yard. And I remember at one point, my wife, I heard her telling one of her friends, "We got the worst looking yard in the neighborhood." I was like, I know she didn't just say that. And she was telling one of her friends, next thing you know, I'm out there edging. I got the whole thing. I got it looking right over a period of time. But it was one of those that we had a HOA. If you got any kind of plants that aren't right, they die out, you get fined. They can fine you per day. And it was just one of those kind of environments where everything was supposed to be right, look right, and it was just very competitive. I enjoyed that for 20 years. But after that, I was like, okay, I've done my ticket, I've done my time. Let's go take what we learned and let's go to Florida.
There you go. Go to Jacksonville. All right.
Yeah,
Share
Ponte
with
Vedra.
us, in wrapping this up, share with us, what does finishing look for you at the stage of your life and your coaching journey?
I think I'm one of those kind of guys where every single day I try to get wins every single day. And I'm not the kind of guy that's going to retire. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. I was like, there's a good chance at 85 years old, I'll still be talking to kids. But it's just the way it is. And I enjoy helping people. I enjoy talking sports. I've been talking sports since I was in the first grade. Even when I was a young kid, we're always talking about the Buffalo Bills and all these different things that were going on. And so I enjoy that. And in all my jobs, I've talked sports. You go in somebody's office to sell them something, and they got a big Georgia Bulldog back there. Next thing you know, you're talking about the game coming up this weekend. It's just been such a big part of my life. But I think for me, I'm just going to continue doing what I do. I like to work. I work long hours. I work every single Saturday. It's hard for me to go on vacation and thoroughly relax. I usually take calls when I'm on vacation. This is just part of my world. I enjoy it. And so it doesn't bother me that I'm talking to people on vacation and stuff like that. I'm not doing it the whole vacation, but I'm working with a lot of people on their journey, and I can't just shut it down for 5 days because I'm in Orlando hanging out by a swimming pool. I think for me, I just like the daily battle of it, helping guys get better.
That's me. It's probably going to be till like I'm 85 or 90. I'll live that long and continue to. All right. Just in the next, kind of wrap it up in the next minute. Just give us a few final thoughts that you want to leave with men as they continue on their journey.
I think the main thing that I would say to just younger men is when you're in your teens and in your 20s, you need to really work hard and you need to get in jobs where you are learning stuff. And especially when your dad's paying the bills, like you're in high school, you need to get in with a work with a football program, work with something where you're getting experience, because basically the world pays for experts. And what happens to a lot of these guys is that in their 20s, they start getting so caught up and finding a girlfriend, looking for a wife. And what happens is the second you go down that path and that becomes your number one deal, you're gonna be forfeiting a lot of your expertise and your ability to command a higher salary. What I would tell younger people today is you need to get your job right first, whatever it is, from stockbroker to lawyer to whatever. You need to work long hours, be the best you can be at it. And at 28, when you are making good money and you're established and you have some security, now look for a girlfriend. Generally, you're going to get a better one anyway, because you are a little bit more mature. You've gone through some stuff and you're making more money. And so those things bring confidence, which means you're probably going to get a more confident woman, which means that she's less likely to leave you or get unhappy in the marriage because you're not able to spend enough time with her. You're not able to do the things that she needs done. And I know a lot of people, they don't want to hear that, but I'm not the only one saying that. I heard Denzel Washington say something very similar the other day, that you better establish your career and you better establish what you're good at before you ever think about getting a wife. And I'm pretty adamant about that. I just think for my daughter, I remember when she was talking about getting married, I was like, if you get married before 23, 24 years old, we'll just put a tent up in the backyard and your cousins will park cars. We're going to have a very small wedding. But if you want to do it right, you need to be closer to 28. And that's basically what she did. And her husband was in real estate and he's done great.
All right, Jay, hey, can you share with us some kind of stories from, I know you've worked with a lot of athletes. If you can kind of share with all the listeners some stories of working with athletes.
So I think the thing that's interesting is every athlete has their own individual story. They have their own, what their background is, how the parents helped them, the different training. Everybody has their own journey. And like, to me, when I take these kids on after I've been working with them for a while, they're really almost like family. I know the parents, I know the kid, I know how they think about things. And Most of these kids, I got a nickname for them. I call them all some kind of nickname. If they got a long name, I shorten it up. I call Tommy, I call him TK. I'm calling these guys stuff like that all the time. And it's just like, to me, that one of the things I'm trying to do on every single call is I listen to them and I analyze what they're saying and we try to fix it. But then when we leave the call, I'm always going to encourage them, where I push them out there. And I think the thing that I've seen with these kids is every kid is so very different. You got a lot of parents out there who are trying to micromanage their kids, and that's a thing within itself. I've done a pretty good job of keeping these parents from micromanaging. I'm like, I need you to give me 30 days. I don't want you to discuss I don't want you asking your child a lot of questions about their sport. Just give me 30 days. Typically, if they back off the gas for 30 days on asking, how was your performance? Did you talk to your coach about what college you're going to play at? When you back them off of that, the parents get more into being a parent. They allow me to guide it, and they start seeing the performance go up. And at the end of the day, I'm just trying to relieve the stress so that they can play better. But I push all these kids. I push every one of them. I do care about a lot of these kids. Like I said, I was at signing this morning. I go to games at night. I'm going to a graduation party that's 2 hours away in 2 weeks for one of the guys I've been working with for 4 years. I'm part of these guys' family, and it's special. And I enjoy that. That is like my social life. I'm not trying to be big in my community and all that stuff. This is what I do.
I know some of the athletes you work with are probably a longer distance too, right? So you probably can't go to their graduation or signing, but you can get them on a Zoom or a FaceTime or.
Yeah, for sure. So I work with athletes all over the country. Primarily Georgia and Florida is about 80%. But I've got some kids in California. I got some Pennsylvania, Ohio kids. I got them all over the place. And usually what happens is I get them in high school. And then when they go off to college, I continue on wherever it is that they go. And with a lot of these college kids, they're all over the country.
Appreciate all you do with kids. And I think coaches and parents and others would just love to hear the story, and just about the piece about like parents backing off. Sometimes parents need to do that, need to hear that. But I think coaches like to hear that too. Can you just give us a little break for a week, or a couple of weeks? I appreciate you sharing that. And Jay, thank you so much for your willingness to share. And where can the listeners find you and follow your story?
So I have a website at sportsintervention.com. So I've got a webpage there. I'm on X at College Scout FB. And then typically you can put in Google Psychology Today, Coach Jay, and I'll pop up on that as well for either Atlanta or Jacksonville. I'm usually the first one to pull up on there. Those are the best places to find me online.
All right, that's a wrap with Jay Holgate. And I want to thank you for being part of Men Pursuing More podcast.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks for listening to Men Pursuing More podcast. Don't forget to follow us at mopandcoaching.com.